to another episode of the Brown and Black Podcast. My name is Jack Rico.
And I'm Mike Sargent.
And every week we take a look at race and pop culture through a brown and black lens. This week we bring you a special sponsored episode celebrating Black History Month, featuring a series of reviews of films from Universal Pictures Home Entertainment Vault. This month's theme will be Black films that have become cultural phenomenons.
And we're going to dissect why that is. They're all available to own on digital and disc with deleted scenes, special features, and we're going to dive into that as well. So each week we're discussing a movie that represents a different genre of film. And thank you to Universal Pictures for the paid support of this episode.
And in this episode, we will be discussing the comedy that became a cultural phenomenon, Girls Trip. Well, Mike, I'm pretty excited about this second episode. In the first episode, we did Get Out, and now we're doing Girls Trip. And I'm going to begin with the same question that I asked you in the last episode. When you first saw Girls Trip, what was your immediate reaction?
Well, here's the thing. It's the kind of film that falls into the category of a bachelor party, or more recently Bridesmaids, a wild, wacky comedy about a bunch of friends who have some misadventures. And so that's kind of what I went in expecting, because it is a genre. It's a genre of film. But I also knew that it's going to be directed by Malcolm Lee, and it was going to be written by Kenya Barris. So,
and produced
so there were
by
a lot
Will
of things
Packer.
about it. Produced by Will Packer. So there were a lot of things about it that gave it a certain pedigree, because I think, we've had, there've been, for every Bridesmaids, there's a ton of other films that just don't work. Okay. Whether it's young people, old people, whatever, just a group of friends on a trip. I mean, The Hangover 1 was good, but 2 and 3 were abysmal. So my first reaction was like, I'm open. I'm hoping that this is going to be good. All right, now, Jack, I'm going to ask you, what did you think of Girls Trip? What was your initial reaction before you went in, and then once you first saw it?
Dude, I'm going to be quite honest with you. I had never seen anything like that. And I think this is why this series in particular for me is like this sort of like awakening, because I'm remembering that these were Black films that I had never seen Black characters portrayed in this way. So to me, it was like novelty, dude. It was like, oh my God, it's Bridesmaids, but with this Black cast that is equivalent to the comedy and the uniqueness and the magic and the chemistry of all the cast together. It had that same quality, and it's the reason that Bridesmaid made $300 million and Girls Trip made $100 million. It was like one of the first times. So for me, much like, Get Out, like I had never seen a Black horror movie that way. I had never seen raunch, Black female raunch comedy in this way. It's almost like Hollywood and gatekeepers never allowed women to ever have a showcase or it never had a platform to be able to tell that type of story, man. And I'm telling you, they should have been doing this 20 years ago.
Well, a couple things you say there that I have to jump on. Like, one, you asked my initial reaction. The other thing about seeing this film, you said you'd never seen it. As a Black person, there are a lot of things that are, within your community. There's phraseology that's within your community. There are terms. There are things that, like, if you know, like if you're Black, And the thing about seeing women do it now, again, I could say I have quite a number of Black female friends. I have 2 Black sisters, so Black women, and I have a Black mother too. So Black women are something that I'm very familiar with, how they relate to each other. But it's not something that's portrayed on screen in this type of genre. So, to me, it's not. So I think that, we could talk about what the actual story is and who the characters are in a minute, but the idea of seeing what I call something that's, and I think all these films that we're going to be talking about over this month are unapologetically Black.
Yes. Oh, yes. And Girls Trip definitely fits that mark.
It is. And Girls Trip is also a perfect example of how the genre of comedy can talk about a number of things that might be too heavy-handed or preachy to get into in a drama or another type of story. While on the surface, the plot is, four friends get together and they're old friends. They drifted apart for 5 years. Now, that's the first thing you can relate to. You have friends that you ran with and then you drift apart. That right there, that's a connection. I think that's universal. Everybody can relate to somebody that they used to hang out with when they were younger or when life didn't get so busy.
Absolutely.
And you always say you're going to get together.
That happens in every culture. Yeah.
That happens in every culture. So you completely relate to that. Now, then they're going to reconnect. And this is at the Essence Awards in New Orleans. And it's for women. So an event, it's sort of like guys going to Vegas, or bachelor party where it's a guy thing. Essence is a celebration of, being Black and being female, being a woman of color. So they're going to something that is culturally significant to rebond, and it's going to someplace, New Orleans, which is very, that it's got a long history there. So there's all that just in the premise that seems simple on the surface, but all these other layers come into it just because it's a Black film. Do you know what I mean?
Right. What's interesting to me, when you look at the premise of Girls Trip, it's an escapist premise, correct? You have these women, like, the movie opens up with these women, these four women, which is
the
Ryan,
Posse,
played by Regina Hall. The Flossy Posse, exactly.
The Flossy Posse.
And the members of the Flossy Posse, which, by the way, it's like TLC with an extra member, right? And it's like the 90s hip-hop girls, and they've grown up. And now all of a sudden they have these lives, and it's hard to kind of get together. And what we start seeing about these women, Ryan, which is played by Regina Hall, her character, and I don't want to say too much because I want to leave some for you guys to just see, but a lot of her struggles is that she has to deal with her selling out herself, the hypocrisy of that. And we've talked about cultural compromising in other episodes here on the Brown and Black podcast. And Ryan is the avatar for that, man. Then you got Sasha Queen Latifah, who plays a gossip reporter. And she's living beyond her means and is in a questionable job that her friends don't necessarily like. Then you got Lisa, which is played by Jada Pinkett Smith. She's distrusting of men in relationships, and pretty much she's committed to not having sex anymore. And then you got Dina, which is Tiffany Haddish, who all onto her own is a character that lives at her own rhythm and her own beat. Yet somehow the chemistry works completely well there. And when I put these four women together, Mike, the thing that immediately kicks off is that these women are looking for freedom. Freedom, they're looking for capitalistic freedom. They're looking for cultural freedom. And then you start thinking about the types of freedoms that these women are looking for by leaving their, I guess, real lives, because you know that these real lives are attached to a system of oppression, especially towards Black women in this country. Like, Black men have to deal with their own things, but Black women have to deal with worse. So when these women escape, there is layers upon layers of what that escape is from. And then you go to New Orleans and the Essence Film, and the Essence Music Festival. And what does that represent? That's Black women coming together for Black empowerment, friendship, community, sisterhood. So from the very get-go, I started noticing that they are on a journey to freedom, to escape this system of oppression that somehow is affecting and impacting their lives.
Well, that's very interesting that stood out to you. What stood out to me about this, about the friendship, is just the whole idea, and this is something I also think people can relate to. And you tell me if this struck you as well. The idea that sometimes there are people in your life who you need to remind you of who you are, because you can get lost, you can get caught up. And I think each character's gotten a little caught up. I think, the Queen Latifah character, she's doing this gossip thing. Now she's questioning, she's got her inner struggle, like whether or not what she's doing is worth her time. But her friends, they see her as being much better than what she's doing. And while they may say, okay, you're beyond that, it hits her a different way, where for her, it's like telling her, you're underachieving. And so there's history there, and that's a very specific thing as a professional of color. Where are you in your career? Are you where you should be? And then that's contrasted by the Regina Hall, who's at the top of quote unquote her game, but it's all a facade. Her marriage is bullshit. And, for me, that also is something where your friends have to remind you of, like, is it worth it? Like, is what you're getting worth it? Wouldn't you rather be known for who and what you really are versus this facade? Only a good friend, only somebody who really knows you can kind of pull you back down to earth and say, what the fuck are you doing? Okay. And I think Tiffany Haddish, and let's not forget Jada Pinkett, because Jada Pinkett's sort of like, she was crazy at one time, but now she's like the nun. She doesn't do anything, living with her mom. And so I think that's also her denying herself, denying who she is, because she feels she has to be something else to be a mom, to be, to survive. So I think out of all of them, they have all compromised themselves, but it's only Tiffany Haddish who is still herself, and she calls bullshit on all of it right away. Now, you could say, does Tiffany Haddish as a character, like, would you want to bring her like to the ritzy club? Well, maybe not. but you also know that she's going to be real. Well, she'd be fun, but she'd be real. She'd be real. Like, no matter what happens, she's going to be who she is. She's not going to she's not going to act like it's okay for this guy to walk all over her friend. She's not. That's just not who she is. So either you love her or you hate her, but she is her. She is her. And she shows all of them they need to be who they are. That was my big takeaway.
I'll give you my final point on this. I remember, when you think about Queen Latifah with these four women, you have to think about Queen Latifah back in 1993, when she was one of the co-stars of a very popular show, one of the most popular African-American shows in TV history, Living Single, that was on Fox. This came a year before Friends. And I remember an interview where Yvette Lee Bowser, who had created that show, she had said that her overall goal was to portray Black characters positively and less stereotypical. And I think that what Malcolm and Will Packard did in this, and, Kenya Barris and Tracy Oliver, is that the level of authenticity that is here is historic to me. It is a trailblazer moment. It's a watershed moment that I don't think a lot of people talk about. It made $100 million at the box office, Mike. We had never seen anything like this. A lot of people said that it couldn't be done. And here we are talking about Girl Strip as a cultural touchstone of American pop culture. So I think that this movie's cultural significance, I think a movie like this will be talked about years to come.
Well, I agree with you. And, it's something, you mentioned that it made over $100 million. It's significant also to mention that it's the first Black-led movie to cross $100 million at the box office. And that same year, there was another film with a, similar plot called Rough Night, led by Scarlett Johansson. Okay. Rough Night made $47 million. Okay. Girl Strip made $140 million. Okay.
And they're talking about a
Rough
sequel
Night
now.
Exactly. Well, they're talking about a sequel, and what's interesting about the sequel, and maybe we'll touch upon that later too, is just the idea of like what I read. Kenya Barris said is like, what are these women doing now? Like at post-pandemic, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? So I love the idea. And there've been a series of films like that where you have characters, whether it's two or more characters, travel to different places. And to me, I would love to see a girl's trip in another country.
So, Mike, in this segment, I want to talk to you about the black male perspective on Girls Trip. I want to talk about how you viewed black men portrayed in this film versus how black men are portrayed in many other films. Talk about the black men behind the camera and how they view this. I mean, I just have so many questions because when we think about Girls Trip, we really talk about it from a very female view only pretty much exclusively. We never really talk about it from the male perspective. So for you, Mike, how did you feel about how the black men were portrayed in this film?
Well, okay, a couple things. Let me contextualize it because I think that this film is about friendship. And what Malcolm D. Lee does and has done really wonderful is make films about celebrating black friendship. That's a very specific thing. The Best Man, I think, is also a cultural phenomenon in what it did for just the idea of a black-led, intelligent, romantic comedy. Now, I know Malcolm, and I've been following his work for a long time. And one thing I know about him, and if you watch all his films, they always have strong female characters in terms of representation. But most importantly, what's here for me as a black man in terms of representation is that there are only a few black males characters, but it's balance, So we have one black male character who's cheating on his wife, and he sees the marriage as more of a partnership. And he's totally willing to keep up the facade for the sake of their image and
that's a lot of men, period. That's a lot of men, period.
Well, that's a lot of men, but that's a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people, but that's one male character. But at the same time, and one male black character, like, is he selling out? What is he? Is he cheating? Is he a bad man? What is he?
Right.
All right. Or is he?
And then you got like a contrast.
But then you got the contrast. You had the Lorenz Tate character, who is everything that a man should be: considerate, respectful, disciplined. Even because he's got opportunities to take advantage of the Regina Hall character because she's emotionally vulnerable, but he doesn't. So because she's married, he doesn't want to give in, even though he's tempted. So we have like a corruptible black male, and then we have the uncorruptible black male. So they both exist. So to me, in the universe of the film, it's important to have that balance. So I had no issue with how the black males are portrayed in the film. And there are other black male characters who I think are just there for, comedic effect. I'll just say two grapefruits, but that's all I'll say. But at the same time, I think one of the things that the film does touch upon is the importance of being loyal to yourself, being true to yourself, because the main character is considering living a lie. And I think that's something that many people of color face in terms of career, in terms of code switching, just in code of image in a white dominated culture.
I also wanted to ask you about Malcolm and Will Packer. I mean, these are men pretty much in Kenya Barris, men that are involved in the creation of 4 black women. How is it that men can write so well? Black men can write so well for black women. Is it just experience? Because I thought that in order to write a genuine female comedy, you have to be female. But it looks like these are myths and not real artistic.
Well, I wouldn't say that's a myth. I think that, I think Tracy Oliver is a writer as well. And they had previously teamed up on Barbershop, The Next Cut. So it's clear that as a writing duel, they complement each other. I feel like Kenya Barris has a thing that he does. And, what he did with Black is he was able to take things and again, the beauty of comedy, talk about difficult things, political things, racially charged things, and in this case, potentially, gender charged things, and talk about it, make it funny. And I think Tracy Oliver, and again, this is my guess because I haven't talked to Tracy Oliver, but my guess is Tracy Oliver is the one that makes sure that all of these women are believable characters and believable, and you understand not only where they are in their relationship with each other, but where they are in their lives, which affects and impacts their relationship with each other. So I think it's that combination of sensibilities. I also think that, if I were writing with a female, and I wanted to create male characters, I need to be able to understand those characters and understand the characters that I have to have, that I'm maybe in charge of the male characters, how they're going to interact with these women.
Right.
Because it's their film. But part of why they do what they do is the relationships they've had with men.
Right. Now, I want to talk to you about the raunch aspects of black men watching black women do raunch comedy, which is something that isn't typical at all, because we have not been allowed to see it. Hold on a second. No wonder I'm thinking my microphone was down this whole time. For me in particular, how do you think that black men who have grown up watching, raunch comedy, whether it's white or black, how do you think they engaged with the raunch comedy of black women? Do you think that they enjoyed it as much? Do you think that's something new to them? And was there a learning curve?
Well, first of all, I didn't grow up on raunch comedy, just so you know. Okay, but I will say that I think, the thing about comedy.
You never watched Animal
House. They say
House.
comedy. I saw Animal House, but I couldn't say I grew up on it. No, I've seen those. I saw Bachelor Party. I saw Animal House. I saw The Hangover.
So
I saw.
You grew up on that stuff, man.
I mean,
we all did.
I did not grow up on it. No, I didn't. But I let's put it this way. I think comedy is the kind of thing, like any genre. I think one of the, I'm a kind of critic who enjoys just seeing a film, reading nothing about it, right? I'm that kind of critic. I don't want to watch a trailer. I don't want to see anything. Just take me wherever you're going. But at the same time, if you know the genre that you're going to see, and in this case, it's a bunch of girls, grown-ass women, doing grown-ass women things, getting into hijinks, I will say it went further. For me, I was like, whoa, okay, yes. There's some scenes with, urine and, wow. Okay, yeah, like, wow. Okay. But, like if you're eating popcorn, you're hoping you didn't get any of that, golden flavor on it. But let me just say that a little butter, for Mike, one, like, buttered? No. Don't eat buttered popcorn during that scene. That's all I say. But what I was going to say is, for me, if I'm in the mood for that, then I'm in the mood for that. And so it doesn't really matter that it's black women doing it versus white women. Am I more comfortable seeing black women be raunchy? That's an interesting question, because it's a question of just how comfortable you are with that kind of humor.
Are you more comfortable as a black man watching black female raunch comedy?
Black female raunch comedy. That's a sentence you don't hear much. I really don't know. I mean, I'd have to like.
Do you want to see more of it? Do you want to see more of it?
Let's put it this way. I'm not a huge fan of raunch comedy. When it works, it works. But I feel it's like horror movies. 90% of horror movies are crap, but it's that 10% that makes you a fan. So if it's done well and it's really funny, I'm all for it. But raunch for raunch's sake, no. And in this case, I think the raunch was not for raunch's sake. I mean, and I enjoyed, I'll tell you what I enjoyed. I enjoyed getting to see, the really stuffy character be taken down a notch by something that happens. And I think that was part of the fun, because a good movie, whether it's raunchy or not, a good comedy has setup and payoff. And I feel like there's a lot of setup and payoff here for what's going to happen. And then they go further than you expect.
So, Mike, I want to move now into sort of the deeper conversations of the film. And I want to start with something from my perspective, from a Latino perspective, on this film in particular, Girls Trip. And, I didn't see it the first time because I wasn't looking for it. But I think after the conversations we had post-Floyd and, you're rewatching the movie again with a critical lens from a Latino perspective or from a racial or ethnic perspective, Then I saw something that I was like, whoa. And I wanted to talk to you about it to see if I'm just like kind of making it up. So there's a scene about 35 minutes into the movie where the four girls are heading out of their hotel room. They're getting dressed. They're about to hit the town, and they're all getting dressed up. As they're getting dressed up, all three of them are good. And Jada Pinkett Smith, she comes out in a Mexican garment of sorts. And as she comes out in this like sort of Mexican garment, there's Mexican music playing in the background. Do you remember any of this?
I do, sort of.
Okay.
I mean, I remember it. Yes, it didn't stand out to me, but I'm listening.
Right. So for a lot of people, it didn't stand out, but for me, it hit me like a ton of bricks, man. Like I was like being hit by eggs. And here's what happened. She comes out. There's like Mexican music in the background, but then Jada responds that the garment is not from Mexico. That the garment is from Guatemala. Then Queen Latifah later says that, then Queen Latifah makes a remark that she looks like a Puerto Rican grandmother, all while Mexican music is still being played in the background. And then right at the end of the scene, to boot, Tiffany Haddish then says, hey, look, don't take too long back there and getting, changed. Like, she said, hey, don't take too long back there making tamales and shit. And I was like, wow, how very interesting the way Latino culture was treated in this scene with four Black women. And then I had remembered that we had a episode for Hispanic Heritage Month, and we had done an episode to see what Black people, how much Hispanic history or Latino culture history Black people knew. And what I got out of that was it felt like they didn't really know us very well. So then I'm here pretty much being reaffirmed once again that Mexican, Guatemalan, Puerto Rican is pretty much the same thing for these four Black characters. And that shows me a representation farther because someone wrote that. Kenya Tracy. So is it their perspective? Is it that they see Latinos as just one group as opposed to 32 countries with 32 different cultures? And that exchange of Mexican music and then the Puerto Rican remark, and then, this was really from Guatemala. I'm going, if I'm a Latino, all this is chaos, cultural chaos to me. And it says to me that like Black community doesn't get Latinos. And you know what's the most ironic thing? Is that Latinos know more about white people and Black people. Now, let me say that again. You know what the most ironic thing is that Latino people know more about white and Black culture than we know our own. And that to me is kind of sad. That there's a lack of education in who we are as a culture. And that portion reminded me how far we still have to go. This movie was just like, in 2017. But it let me know how far Latinos still have to go to be portrayed in accurate representations of what our country is. And there's a lot more education that still needs to be done. All right,
well, I think two things. I think that or three things really. I think from the lens of the average Black person, I think like you said, we've talked about this. I think Black people, not unlike the rest of the country, okay, and you said even Latinos themselves, yeah, they've kind of been looped in together. If you're Latino, you'll go to the Puerto Rican Day Parade, even if you're not Puerto Rican, because it's Latino culture. So for the most part, and we could get into the political underpinnings of, are you Hispanic or non-Hispanic, whatever that means, and filling out the census and whatnot. Do you speak Spanish? And like, if you speak Spanish, like you're that part of this segment of the population. So I think that's one thing. The perception is like it is a monolithic. It's like, yeah, you could be Mexican or you could be Puerto Rican. Anything else, like they don't really even know what it means, Colombian,
but that's
right?
the reality, Mike. But that's the reality, right? Is that we're all just like one. We're monolithic to everyone outside of the Latino culture. I'm sure Asians think the same thing about us, that we're all just like a monolithic culture because we all speak Spanish.
Well, again, that's what I think. I think so contextually, I think that that's like the society we live in terms of how people see Latinos.
Right.
I think in terms of humor, comedy, clearly, the ethnicity, the idea of embracing the ethnicity. It's like if there was a Latino character, he'd come in, there'd be a strumming of a guitar. You know what I mean? Those are sort of, you know what I mean?
Or what's that favorite, or your favorite, Latino Casanova voice?
Exactly. Yes, I am Emilio del Villar. Whatever it is. So I'm just saying those are kind of devices. Bro. Well, it is. I'm just saying those are comedic devices. People get it. If you put on that, or if she's the seductress, hello, I think you are, whatever. There are certain comedy things that if you're Latino, you probably could be offended, or like you said, you may just go along to it. You're just used to it. Like you said, the first time you saw it, it didn't even occur to you.
I didn't even notice it.
You didn't even notice it.
I was part of the humor, and then you watch it critically, and boom, you're like, look, it's not that I was offended, because I'm not Mexican or Guatemalan or Puerto Rican. But I think what it is that the Latino existence in the United States, you think as a Latino that people are educated enough, that they've gone to school and graduated universities and have had Latino friends, that they just know that Latinos are not one monolithic block, that we are individuals that wish that everyone would see us as individual Latinos, not as a group.
Yes, but that's not funny. So it's like the black joke. I'm just saying, it's just to most people that's not funny. They can't get that joke.
Right.
They can't get it.
Right. And that sucks, because that's the way stereotypes are created, right? That if something is real, and I wrote an article about this on showbizcafe.com about how white editors, and this was about the Shakira Piqué thing, and how white editors usually pick out like the most salacious shit from Latino culture. Like, that was an ugly divorce. And that ugliness was covered by mainstream media. But then you put something that is culturally significant and it's boring. So then what does that say about creators and stereotypes? How long will creators understand that maybe you need to put in a little bit more creative effort to make that boring thing entertaining? Wit.
Before we end the segment here, as we've been talking about cultural significance, you asked me in the last segment about whether I'm more comfortable seeing, brown women be raunchy versus white women be raunchy. So I want to know, the same question that you, are you more comfortable seeing brown or black women be raunchy than white women be raunchy?
Wow. First of all, no one's ever asked me that.
You got to think about it. You got to think about it. See?
I do, because is it skin color that makes it funny? I think that's the big elephant in the room question, is that does white skin raunch comedy make me feel like I should laugh hardier, huh? Or does that black skin, because it's black skin, then it's not as fun? Let me tell you something. Both movies, Bridesmaids and Girls Trip, were equivalently funny to me. And I'm reminded of that scene where Jada Pinkett gets caught like right in the middle of that glide rope and then urinates over everybody. And that to me was so crazy. I felt like one of those people in there when that moment happened. And I was like, wow, that was so funny. And there were hilarious moments like that. The Tiffany Haddish moment was very disturbing, yet extremely funny because she made that seem so genuine and so authentic that, I mean, look, when you see raunch that makes you laugh, you know that it was well crafted. You know that the talent is great. And so these women are at the top of their game. They're they're comedic geniuses, and not everybody can pull this raunch off. They were able to do it, which is the reason they've been asked a lot, when's the sequel coming? And can they top that raunch? But I thought it was great raunch, as good as any male raunch comedy.
We've been talking about Black representation, and we've been talking about Latino representation in Girls Trip. But what is your take on white representation in Girls Trip? And do you feel that a Black comedy needs to appeal to a white audience in some way, or create characters that the white audience can relate to?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's really interesting. Like what I've been doing as of late is I've been seeing Black films and just focusing on the way white characters are treated. And it says a lot, Mike. You're going to tell me that when you see a white character like in Wakanda Forever, it doesn't have layers and layers and layers behind it? Of course. So I think in this film in particular, there's two white people in the film. There's the publicist, and then there's the sponsor. The publicist for Regina Hall's character, Ryan, is this redheaded woman who wants to connect to Black culture, but always comes off awkward doing it. And now we had talked about white people doing this in Get Out, in that famous party scene. We had talked about it, like a whole discussion on it in the last episode. Here we see it in a much more milder way, where there is this sort of like code switching that wants to happen. This like sense that I'm not expecting the Black person to become white assimilated. The white person feels forced, or feels like they must oblige to be the ones to connect with Black. I don't know if it's a position of privilege that they feel that, oh, you know what, let me come down and be Black for you. But there was a sense of, how are these characters constructed, and how are the actors inhabiting them? And so that was one of the things that I noticed about them. The second thing is like the gatekeeping aspects of it. So Ryan, Regina Hall's character, is trying to get to the peak of her industry, get a book deal, get a TV show. And the person that can make that happen is not a Black person. It's a white publicist woman. And then when she actually gets to the client isn't Black or Latino or Asian or Indian American. They're white. They're the ones in the position of power. So even in Girls Trip, you're still having to answer to a white person who's gatekeeping you from living your dream life. Did you notice that?
Well, I noticed it in a different way. Two things. One, I think it's kind of fascinating, the idea, like, as a Black person, as a Latino person, we could talk about code switching, so we're accepted by whites. But whites are almost never good at code switching. So is that like, sign code switch failure,
Right.
code switch failure, so I don't know. And I think it's an interesting question. What is it called, code switching for white people? Because it's so obvious that you don't talk that way. I don't know. Because as a Black person,
I mean, anytime that you have
person.
to change your, I was going to say, anytime that you have to change your behavior in language to fit somewhere else, that will be the definition of code switching, right?
Okay. All right. So I think is real. And I think as we talked and Get Out, that's a real thing. So I also happen to like Kate Walsh as an actress. I at first, yes, I did used to watch Grey's Anatomy because I had a girlfriend who was into it, and I liked her on that show. So, and then she got her own show. So I think she's good. So I like the actress playing it. And like I said, it's real. Now, in regards, but she's also someone who's encouraging our character, the Regina Hall character, to keep up the facade, to fake it, to just get that big contract. Let's make that money, which I think many people in entertainment, okay, who have agents can relate to having an agent or a publicist, someone who's telling you what's to do, but it's really about the money. It's not about the long term. Like, they don't care about, the integrity of self or whether you're true to yourself. It's like, we can get a big money if you do this commercial with dog food, even though you don't have a dog.
Right.
So I think,
and then you can start talking about that sort of black commodification that is seen there too.
Well, I think it's black commodification, but I think that that's just commodification in general, because you mentioned that the end buyers are white, and that's the power structure, and that's real too. So at the end, you've got an entire, like, in this movie, who is the antagonist? The antagonist for all of these women is the society they live in. The society they live in is what is making Queen Latifah's character feel she has to do this. The society we live in is what's making the Ryan Hall feel that, each character, with the exception of Tiffany Haddish, is having to bend and become someone else because of where they are in society, because of where society places them, in terms of their own ambition. So I'd say I think the representation, as gatekeepers, I think that that's just real. And I think that that is something brown and black people can relate to as well. One of the other things about this film that I think is significant in terms of it being culturally significant and iconic is what it did for Tiffany Haddish. I think it really introduced audiences to Tiffany Haddish. Most people had never even heard of her before this film. And her character of Dina is really the standout. It's what everybody was talking about. And since then, we've seen a lot from Tiffany Haddish, but that was really an opportunity. And I think the casting of the film was important. I think, you mentioned before Queen Latifah's history. I think she brings that to a film, like a lot of great actors, like, we know who this person is. You enjoy who they are, and you enjoy the kind of characters they play. So I think casting her, and then casting her with Jada Pinkett, who they haven't been in a film together since Set It Off, which is another black classic. And there's even a little nod to Set It Off in the film. One of the characters says it to the other. If you saw the film and Set It Off, you caught that moment. So there are things like that, I think, that are sort of almost meta about that kind of casting, about putting Queen Latifah with somebody like that, and having all these characters interact, and just seeing these friendships, having, we as an audience develop a relationship with actors. That's just what it is. It is what it is, especially comedic actors. And I think we have a relationship with Jada Pinkett. We have a relationship with Queen Latifah, and I think to a large extent there was in a relationship with Regina Hall. I think they're all much more, well-known figures. But I think Tiffany Haddish, not only did she shine, but she was like out of nowhere, and you just enjoyed seeing them all bounce off of her.
So what do you think were the factors that contributed to her star power? Dude, she was announcing the Oscar nominations a few years ago. I mean, she broke through in a way where she was everywhere, man. And I'm just saying to myself, what is it in particular that has made her such a star?
Well, to me, I think what makes her a star is the same thing that makes a star a star. It's presence and likability. There are certain actors who you like them, whether they're playing a bad person, whether they're playing a villain, whether they're playing, a killer. You still like them. You enjoy them. Christopher Walken, he could play the worst criminal, whatever. You still enjoy him because of who he is. And I think Tiffany Haddish has that quality, like a Richard Pryor, like an Eddie Murphy, where they're just likable. You like them no matter what the role they're playing, but then you also enjoy, and this, I think, again, all the great comedians, Jim Carrey, you enjoy just how unabashedly silly and foolish that they are. You know, and that's
Right.
Tiffany Haddish. She just went with that performance. She just went there. She didn't care. She did not care. And you really, when you see an actor, whether it's in a comedy or a drama, who doesn't give a fuck, they're just going for it. You enjoy it. You're bravo, like you applaud because they gave you a performance. They gave you something you don't see every day. And I think that is, to me, that's part of the appeal.
I'm just going to ask you straight up. When you saw the banana grapefruit scene, which is the scene that we all remember from the movie, that's the scene that everyone was like, I can't believe I just saw that. And she did that so faithfully. and honestly, when you saw that scene, were you offended, disturbed? What went through your mind, and who did you see that scene with?
Well, I don't remember who I saw it with the first time. But this time I watched it, I watched it with a couple friends, and, I mean, it's an outrageous.
Were women in that group? Were women in that group?
There was a woman there. There was a woman in the group, and they laughed. I mean, I mean, again, I think it's like any kind of raunchy thing. Like either raunch humor, either you blush from raunch humor, or you laugh, or you're disgusted.
Right.
So I think one of those three reactions is what you're going to get, and I think, you said her performance.
I think I got all three of them.
You think you got all say? You said her performance was honest. I'd like to know how you know, but I do think that it was unabashed. Okay, and that that's what it was raw.
Let me put it to you this way: I felt it was an NC-17 type of graphic, very, very. A very accurate representation of what it could have been. But I think we should just leave it there.
New Orleans is a very unique city. The music, the culture, the people. I wanted to bring all that to the big screen.
Mike, a little while ago, you mentioned that you knew Malcolm Lee, the director of Girls Trip. How do you know him, and what did you think of his direction for this film? What did he bring to the film that you felt only Malcolm could bring?
Well, okay, the way I know Malcolm is because we kind of started at the same time, both making films, both making romantic comedies. At the time I made my first film was a film called Personals. The star of my film, Malik Yoba, had gotten a script for Personals. They were offering him a role, but he ended up not doing the role. He was doing my film at the time, but a couple things happened for me with when he made his film The Best Man. At the time, The Best Man, black comedies kind of fit into a box. You either had what they call the hood comedy, the Friday,
I'm gonna get you, sucker,
house party, that kind of comedy, black comedy, or you had like, an Eddie Murphy led, big budget, he's the only black character in it kind of thing.
Beverly Hills Cop.
Beverly Hills Cop. So there really wasn't, there wasn't the intelligent romantic black comedy where the characters are adults and you didn't just go for the laugh. There are funny things in it, but I think one of the strengths of Malcolm with that film and what it did for the genre is that he has an ability to shift between comedy and drama. It's a tone thing. And I think it's something he was able to strike with his first film, and he's only gotten better over time. And I think the hands of a lesser director, even with the cast and the script that it has, Girls Trip could have come across as just puerile or just raunch for the sake of raunch. So there are definitely raunchy things in there, but I think that ability to mine comedy out of a scene and drama out of a scene and utilize actors to their best effect, I think the casting of Tiffany Haddish says it all. So
right.
I think that's what he brings to it.
So the writing here clearly is top notch. Kenya Barris, Tracy Oliver. Tracy Oliver is the first black female screenwriter to pen a 100 million plus grossing film. What was it about the writing that they got right?
Well, I think it's all the things we discussed. I think that the nature of friendships, the nature of female friendships, the nature of black female friendships, you know, the relationships that women have with men and how it affects their lives. You know, like if you get hurt, you know, you may retreat and be a character like the Jada Pinkett character, or if you are, you know, if you're trying to achieve something, you may want to pretend things are okay when they're not, like the Regina Hall character. You know, so I think the impact that they have on each other as friends and their friendship, and then the impact that life has on them, and the impact that the male relationships in their life has on them, and the real strongest important part is how important it is to have, you know, female friends who have your back, who are watching out for you, who are reminding you. I mean, I think that's across the board, you know, with all friendships. I mean, you got to have friends who are going to be like, Jack, don't do this. This is not the best move. Or Jack, listen, I don't know what you're hesitating for. You know, you need friends who are going to be there, who don't have an agenda other than what's best for you. And that's not always easy to find. I think especially with women, I think women don't always, and I hear this a lot from women, that they don't, it's hard to find, you know, and not all women, but I've heard it a lot from women, that it's hard to find friends who are like really there, who really want you to succeed as much as they want themselves to succeed. They don't have a different agenda. They're not competing with you for the attention of men or anything like that. And these women don't compete with each other. And I think that that's a very strong part of their relationship. They're there for each other. They're not competing with each other. And that's not something you always see on screen either. And it's something you've never seen on screen with, not on the big screen anyway, with black women.
I wanted to get back to the point that we spoke a little while ago about, does a black comedy like Girls Trip, does it need to reach a broader, wider audience? And what we mean by that is white people, Latinos. Latinos are the number one movie-going demographic in the United States, and I've never seen a black film targeted towards a Latino audience. I don't think it's ever existed. They do not make films for us. And interestingly, you know, when William Levy was in the film, you know, listen, we go back to this thing. He's the thirst. He's the stereotype. It's 2017, man. Queen Latifah is just looking at him as the Latino lover. Hey, we need to get a Latino lover in here. William Levy. And I'm sure William Levy doesn't want to do that job, but they're probably paying him good money. So
they could pay me.
We're
to
put
be
in a position. Right. But, you know, as an actor, and I've interviewed William Levy, and I've asked him questions like this where he's like, look, I don't want to be a Latino Brad Pitt. I want to be seen as a real actor. And he wasn't able to showcase that in this movie. And, you know, it's funny. We'll talk about the features in a little while. There was scenes that were cut out where he was just being that. And I'm glad that they cut it out. They didn't give him much screen time, but it was just very interesting. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not a way to attract a Latino audience. Secondly, the question, and I think this is more the question I wanted to ask you, Mike. Why did white audiences go see Girls Trip?
Well, I think, let me reframe that. Why did movie-going audiences embrace Girls Trip? Because yes, Latinos may over-index, but, you know, white is a dominant culture. Clearly it's directed towards black people. So, you know, you ask why they don't make black films directed towards Latinos. I mean, I think that'll come, you know. I think, you know, eventually there will be, you know, the Afro-Latino, there'll be the crossover, there'll be the film with that cast, you know. Hopefully that's coming soon. But that being said, I think that, you know, the reason that the audience embraces, the movie-going audience embraces, because, again, why did they embrace this film that year and not Rough Night? Why? Because it was good. It was a good movie. It was funny. It was funny. It was well written. It worked. You know, There are movies where you see the movie and it doesn't matter. It's got big name. Scarlett Johansson probably commands more money than everybody in that film. Okay. But that movie bombed because it's not about Scarlett Johansson. Everybody knew Scarlett Johansson that year, but everybody knew Tiffany Haddish by the end of the year. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there is a level that you can reach of quality that eclipses whatever box the film may have been set up to be in.
So, Mike, as we come into our last segment to analyze the bonus features that are part of the disc, listen, I never really see those whenever I get a disc. But on this occasion, we wanted to talk about it, so I had a chance to look at them. And, you know, it's interesting. There is no alternative ending here, but what there are is a lot of cut, deleted scenes and extras. And I think one of the really cool things about the features, the add-ons that they add on to, you know, to these discs and streaming options or digital options is that they put on content that you ask yourself, why wasn't that included in the movie? Now, there are some particular standouts, and I'm not sure if you saw one in particular, but the ones that I saw were gags that I thought were funny, but for some reason, either they didn't include it because it might have elongated the movie and they just had to keep, you know, to a particular time down. There were some very emotional moments that I'm shocked it didn't include in the film. And there's this one deleted scene with Mike Coulter, who plays Stuart, Regina Hall's husband in the movie. And it's him essentially begging her to come back. And she thinks about it. Now, he gave like this monologue, bro. Like a monologue. It was like a heavy speech. And they cut out the whole thing. And I'm going, why did they cut that scene out? Now, here's my, and I'm speculating here, Mike, because, you know, I don't know any better, but I'm thinking that they did not want to present men with that much screen time, or help me out here, man. Like, why didn't that scene work? Why was that scene cut out?
Well, I don't think that scene, well, let's put it this way. I think you're right. I think in a film like this, now, let me just give a context here, because I'm a big fan of deleted scenes and extended scenes and director's commentary, because I think it gives you insight not only how the film could have been, but in many ways, but how it's been carved out of, you know, just the best is what's left. So it's like what Michelangelo said, the statue is inside the stone. He just releases it, you know, and I think part of the editing process is honing it down. You know, my view on filmmaking is that a film is really directed 3 times. You know, when you're writing it, you know, whether you're the director or not, you're directing it in your head. It's all being played out. And second time, it's getting directed on set. You're working with the actors and getting everything. And, you know, you're improvising and things are happening. And then the third time you direct it in the editing room. So I think, sometimes it's about pacing, you know, and I think in the case of the Mike Coulter scene, it's their movie. You've got 4 characters and they're the focus. And, you know, I don't think you need to know why he's doing what he's doing. I think that sometimes you have a scene where it's explaining something, but if you pay attention to the movie, it's the actor. If it's a good actor, the way they look, the way they deliver a line can tell you a lot more, and you don't really need it. It slowed down the film. You don't need that. It's almost expository. So sometimes, you know, you may have there's a famous story about Clint Eastwood. When he did the Man with No Name, there was all this dialogue and he just cut it out. He convinced the director to cut it all out. So he has very little dialogue, and that became one of his things. And I think overall, very often, if you can get an actor to portray the character, to believe in the character, and I think Mike Coulter's great. I totally buy him as that character. I don't think you needed it. And I think that, like you said, why give screen time to the men? It's a girl's trip.
Right. Yeah, but you'd think that, dudes would play more of a meteor role, but I guess not, man. I guess
you see,
not,
here's the thing. He had a meteor role. It was in the script. It just got cut.
It just got cut?
Just got cut.
Thanks for tuning into the Brown and Black podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Girls Trip. For us, this was a heartfelt and humorous film that celebrates the bonds of friendship and the power of personal growth. With this amazing cast, lively cinematography, and catchy soundtrack, the film provides a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining close relationships with those who matter most. The film's themes of friendship, sisterhood, and personal growth are relatable, timeless, making it a standout comedy drama that will resonate with audiences for years to come.
We also want to remind you that you can own Girls Trip on digital or disc. And for those who want to stay updated on upcoming movies, sign up for Universal Pictures Home Entertainment email list to get sneak peeks at upcoming movies.
You can visit uphe.com/news. That's uphe.com/news. And that's it for this special episode of Brown and Black. If you would like to support this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. Your help will allow us to be heard by many more people. This episode was edited by Joshua Torado. You can follow our comments and opinions on @BrownBlackPodcast on Twitter, Instagram, and now on YouTube. In the next episode, we'll be analyzing the critically acclaimed film Queen and Slim. We'll see you on the next episode of Brown and Black.